So thank you very much, everyone, for coming to this talk. I know there are plenty of others to have chosen, so I really appreciate you coming to this one. But I have actually been reliably informed this has got the best air conditioning, so I don't know if that influenced your choice in any way, but you made a good decision. So, yes, I'm Kelsey Smith, and I'm Director of Design Research at Thomson Reuters, and I work in the Finance and Risk Division. So my team focus on creating products for the financial markets. And I want to talk to you today about a phenomenon in the creation of products that I call a user could does not equal a user would. And this refers to the risks of mistakenly believing that just because we can imagine that a user could do something, that they would do something, that an imagined use case can be a real use case. And as HCI sort of UX professionals, we kind of intuitively know that method, that kind of assumption-driven decision-making process, isn't going to yield much value. You might get lucky. Yet we still find ourselves working with individuals or teams that just seem to have conviction that they know what the right thing is, built perhaps on assumptions. And I think it's an important subject for us to discuss as a discipline, because whilst there are many examples of organisations that kind of get this stuff right, they have embraced user experience, or they've managed to bring all the processes, the de-risking processes in-house, there are countless others that haven't. So we've got to work with those people, so we've still got our work cut out for us. And maybe it's surprising, maybe the situation is surprising, because creating products is a risky old business. Eric Ries, paraphrasing Eric Ries, 10 years ago when he wrote the Lean Startup, he talked about the problems of creating products in an environment of extreme uncertainty. And it still feels true right now. I mean, what around us is kind of stable and makes that process easy. We forget the kind of politics and climate and economics bit closer to home, stuff like technology changes at such a pace that, it's really difficult to make decisions, stable decisions that you think are going to build products that are going to be of great value. And you would imagine that given this context, this difficulty of making products, that extreme prudence and caution would prevail. We would recognise those risks, but perhaps not. Perhaps we don't. This is maybe a bit of a coarse metric, but 1,000 apps a day on the App Store, on the Apple App Store. The Apple App Store isn't even the biggest App Store, but it just seems so unlikely that many of these products that all this effort and money is going into making are going to be those well thought through products that are going to really change people's lives and become essential to what they do. Okay, some of them were never meant to be the next Pokemon Go. Some will. Some of them are meant to be ephemeral, and some of them are meant to kind of product of bedroom tinkering, but a lot of them are serious products that people want to build their lives around. So, far from prudence and caution, in this context, it's easy to see that we still see what Rees called the kind of just do it mentality, kind of slightly gung-ho attitude to creating products. And equally, far from kind of more adoption of those de-risking methodologies, things that we all know about and the reason we're in this industry, we see what Rees calls total abandonment of process. So it's kind of not surprising that a lot of products that get built in this kind of context can fail, or things that we thought would have value have less value. I met a product manager a few years ago who described his perspective on this problem, the pressure he was under to release features, the pressure he was under to just do it to get it out there. He said, features aren't, they're not released, they escape. There wasn't that thought-through process of bringing something well thought through to market. And there's a risk. There's a big risk of this just do it approach. I mean, just do it limits the opportunity to fully understand exactly what the problem is that we're trying to solve. And when you have that, you know, there's a real risk that you're just going to kind of solve the wrong problem. I'm standing in front of the screens all the time, so I'll do it again. In fact, I'm just going to keep doing it. You know, in solving the wrong problem, you get this syndrome that people call this kind of beautiful wrong thing syndrome. These amazingly well-designed objects that just kind of miss the mark. And there's a terrible double tragedy associated with that. One, all of that effort, all of that money that's gone into building that thing is gone. It's not likely to come back again either. And the second part is the user need is still not satisfied. And it's not like we don't know how to do things. We've got a very good idea about how to get product development right. We know all about the failing fast and failing early and failing often and iteration and all those tried and tested mantras of kind of lean and agile and others. We know about the kind of value of investing in upfront discovery work to find out what the problem is before we dive into spending money solving it. And whilst there are many kind of got this stuff right, maybe they've got leadership that is really supporting a UX process, there remains, you know, plenty of others that we need to work with who still think that imagined use cases are justified for investment. So what I want to do is I want us to have a look at this problem of not understanding the problem. And I have picked 3 examples of behaviour that feed into this that I've seen in my team experience when we're working. And then I want us to have a look at 3 approaches that we've adopted that we use to help us in this situation. So the first one is probably pretty common to everybody. This word innovation, when it's misused, has this unfortunate and unintentional effect of displacing a more thorough rationale, a rationale that might look for a deeper understanding of the problem. And if you like, kind of that word innovation, when it's misused, it's kind of synonymous with the just do it approach. And, you know, under the banner of innovation, it's possible to get away with an awful lot. And an awful lot of assumption making, a lot of building things based around assumptions. There's a guy called Jeff DeGraff, who was new to me, but maybe you guys have heard of him, so-called Dean of Innovation. He's a Wired writer, author, and other things. And he talks about kind of the false ambition of innovation, the false confidence that this word can give us. He even equates it to sort of coffee and the kind of false confidence that caffeine can give you. And this phenomenon that we're experiencing is partially cultural. We're always being encouraged to kind of just do it, kind of to get on with this thing, push it out. But it's also partially a reflection of just how easy it is to make stuff. I mean, just think back to the 1,000 apps a day. It's easy to push stuff. So it's easy to see in this context how misuse of the word innovation and the themes that are around that can drive the user could is not equal to user would phenomenon, a misunderstanding of the problem to solve. So the next behaviour that I want to talk about, a key driver behind our self-belief, is just how good we are at convincing ourselves about what we know. And loads of people write about this, Daniel Kahneman most famously. He talks about the kind of power of bias, those mental shortcuts that we use for decision making. They inform our decisions, but also can kind of blind us to what we know and what we believe, what we don't know. And it's surprisingly, when I was researching this, it's amazing how well documented this is. It's almost like the product management, product creation process has woken up to the influence of bias. So it is really well documented. And I don't pretend to know all about biases, and maybe these guys in the room that know these things much better than me. There are many different types. But a great example is availability bias. So availability bias is decision making based on immediate context, as far as I understand it. It's easy to see how something as powerful as availability bias can really drive decision making to make products. You might decide that someone say, I might use a particular technology because that's the technology my developers in front of me are using. I might decide to adopt a certain design a certain workflow because that's the way I think I would do it. Or I might decide to use a product development process because that's the way we've always done it. It's easy to see how these powerful biases can influence behaviour going forward. Something definitely that I have seen. The third and final behaviour I want to talk about, and one that's most interesting to me, is this idea about ambiguity and how uncomfortable ambiguity is. We don't like not knowing the answer when we're creating products. We like to think that we know. If we have a gap in our understanding of what is required, we'll fill it with something. It's far more comfortable to have an answer, even if it's not quite right. It's very human to want to resolve this ambiguity. But for me as a researcher, this is really interesting. Because to engage in a UX research approach requires the exact opposite of that. UX research is about embracing ambiguity. UX research says, we don't know what the answer is. In fact, we're going to find out as we go. Maybe that's not a very human thing to do. So when we're working with product people or teams who are struggling with this, then yeah, it's something you can understand. It takes incredible discipline to embrace ambiguity, and therefore it's far more likely that all these people are just going to lean back on their biases or on their assumptions. Okay. So we've had a quick look there at 3 drivers. I'm sure there are loads more behind this phenomena of a user could does not equal a user would. But now let's turn our attention to some of the things that we can do, some of the things that the approaches that we have developed that help us in this situation. And the objective of these approaches is pretty simple. Let's encourage a focus on real problems rather than imagined problems. And the best way that I can describe how we do this, or the effect that we're trying to have with these approaches, is to introduce doubt. So effectively what I want to do when I'm working with developers, when we have a really strong belief that they know what's right, is kind of undermine that confidence. But do it in a really respectful, positive way. But it's really important that we introduce that kind of resetting activity, because therefore we create an opportunity for change, and after that we can reorient around a better defined confidence. Effectively, replace that false confidence with real confidence. We do this by undermining. And there are 3 approaches I want to talk about. The first one we call instant insights. And it was born out of the frustration of watching well-funded, well-meaning projects kind of head off in a direction with no visible, tangible understanding of the problem that they're going to solve, maybe kind of a just-do-it approach. And instant insights is basically super lean desk research with a bit of heuristic analysis, nothing special. But what this approach does is it unpicks the problem context to find out what the underpinning drivers are, the things that we really need to know when we're looking at this problem. The instant part of instant is important to us because we sometimes need to do this work incredibly quickly. Often when the project's in flight, so work we will do, this kind of work can be a couple of hours or a couple of days. It has to be done very quickly. But remember, our aim is just to introduce doubt into the prevailing assumptions, not to solve the problem. And just quickly a bit of context, so it's more tangible. The context that I work in is this product called Thomson Reuters Icon. Here's a blurry picture of it. And it is a tool for finance professionals. It contains sort of 300 smaller apps that work together. So there's an awful lot going on. There's an awful lot of people working on this product. These apps integrate in really, really complex ways. And Icon has a problem. This is the problem. The what's new problem. So a lot of professional tools suffer from the same problem. How do we keep our users up to date with all of the updates and the bug fixes and all the other things, the upgrades that we've made? And work was going on looking at this piece of work. And again, like I said, it was a just do it approach without any really tangible evidence that the problem has really been understood. So what we want to do, using this instant insights approach, is quickly develop a handful of believable statements that will have the effect of kind of introducing doubt. And the first step when we do this kind of work is to look at some competitors. It's just to say, well, how are other people solving the problem? And some really obvious ones. And we're not looking at these, the only reason we're looking at these big players is we say, look at the depth of their understanding of the problem that you're trying to solve. Look at what they try, look at how much effort they're putting into solving the problem that we're about to do, running off with the Just Do It approach. This stuff's got, it's got depth of experience is incredible, it's got editorial content, leaderboards, user ratings, classifications, release notes, all these kind of things. This is the level of effort it takes to fix this problem. So we've got our first statement. It's a Google-sized problem. Just do it isn't going to get us where we need to be. Then we might look at the existing experience. Can't see very well here, the lights are a bit bright, but this is a typical icon layout. There's an awful lot of stuff going on here. And the access point for what's new is kind of up there. I mean, a user could go there, but would they? Well, probably not, because they've got all this stuff to do. They've got their job to do. So the idea that anyone's going to independently go and seek out this updated information is just so slim. We talk to our customers enough to know that they're pretty busy people. So we've got our second statement. Users have low motivation to enter what's new. You know what? That's kind of enough. We might develop a few more statements to support this, but really that's all we really need to do. Those two statements by themselves, for me, that kind of sizes up a lot of what the problem's really about. Now there's happy stories to the end of all of these examples, and I'm not going to go into, but I can chat about it later. Okay, let's move on. The second approach that we take, we kind of phrase it as making a weak position powerful, making our weak position powerful. And I'll describe what I mean by this, because often we find ourselves working with stakeholders who just are convinced they've got the right answer. They just believe in the product they made, and they perhaps without much foundation to that. And in those contexts, which we find ourselves in quite a lot, user research can get demoted to the role of usability testing. We get asked to, can we validate the UI? Something that happens a lot. And usability testing and UI validation is super important, but it tends to kind of focus on the low-level interaction level stuff. It certainly isn't concerned with the kind of high-level propositional value of this thing. So, but we have this opportunity, we have this position to have a conversation with the customer. So we use it powerfully by steering the conversation away from UI onto the proposition. We've got a conversation, we're going to use it. The key, of course, is to do this in a way that doesn't offend or threaten. And whilst this is really basic UX, asking proposition level questions, remember in the context where the stakeholders have just said, validate the UI, this stuff could be really powerful. So I'll give you an example of this. So this is an app that is part of the Icon product that I showed you before. This app is called Healthcare Intelligence app. And it provides pharmaceuticals data for markets professionals. And the team that built this had good reason to assume that finance professionals want this. They were buying this stuff elsewhere. So thought, well, if we provide it direct, everyone's going to be happy. Very, very convinced that that was true. And our role was brought in to validate the UI. Can they click? Can they drill down? Can they do all that sort of stuff? So we use our position powerfully by steering the conversation towards high-level questions. We ask basic stuff like, how valuable would this product be in your daily working life? It's a very simple question, but very powerful. What can we do to make this idea more central to your work? Big questions, but so simple. And of course, the UI tested well. But Would a financial professionals come here to get this information? Well, they could, but the conversation about value revealed a gap in the understanding of the problem. So yeah, these guys want that stuff. That's true, we understand that. But when we talked to them, they said, well, we're markets guys. We don't really care too much about what the drug is, what the problem it's going to solve. We just really want to know things like, well, how big is the market share for that drug? What percentage of the market that the companies running the trials do they own? And how many other companies are developing the same drug? So yeah, we want that stuff. We want it through the lens of markets analysis. That insight wouldn't have been known if we'd gone in with a UI, usability testing approach. So we use our weak position more powerfully. Okay, I've got a few minutes left. So the next and final approach I want to talk about is super simple. And we call it mental model mismatch. I don't really call it that, but it sounds snappy. And all we're doing here is we're simply pointing out when a proposed solution is going to require behavior change on the part of the user to be effective. And all we want to do is draw this out and make it known. And we do it by comparing the proposed solution with an existing solution. So it's not competitor comparison, it's mental model comparison. And we do this because asking a user to change behavior, to do something in a way that they don't normally do, means that they have to work harder, and that's going to carry a risk. And when designing the kind of the harder task, it's designed in a way that will support existing mental models. It's very easy to abandon all that stuff for the sake of convenience when it doesn't quite fit. So the example I want to give you is menus. These aren't icon menus, but work was underway to put some stuff into icon menus. Very low-level UX, but pretty typical UX work. These are icon menus, these are OS menus, Apple OS menus. And the aim here was simply to demonstrate how these different formats of menus work. And they're a great way of describing the value of a mental model. So, top-down menus. They've been around for like 30 years. This is Apple Lisa or something from over 30 years ago. This is from a couple of months ago. They're virtually identical. An extremely strong mental model. We know what to do and what we're going to get when we go to these menus. If you change that, you will break this. And the secret of these menus is they don't change. Largely, the content in there is static. Context menus are entirely different. Can't see that very well. These are context menus, right-click menus. We're all super familiar with this stuff. Really strong mental model. Different to the mental model for the drop-down menus. The secret of these is that they are dynamic. The content will change. That's the mental model that we have. And that was all we needed to do. We need to say, these menus work in this way, these ones work in that way, you're trying to do something which is different to both. Effectively, they want to put the wrong content in the wrong menu. But simply by drawing out the difference between the behavior change they're expecting and what users are normally used to doing was sufficient to make that point. When I talk about mental models, I like to talk about force touch. Because Apple took a very, very simple mental model, one we've just looked at with the context menu. They took that mental model and they stretched it slightly without breaking it. It's a really great example to use when we're talking about the risks associated with behavior change, which is why I use this. Apple are able to introduce these paradigms and these behavior changes because they've got, obviously, a super loyal and tolerant user base. So I say to the people that I'm working with, do you think that your customers are going to be equally as tolerant of the behavior change that you're introducing? Apple do it very, very carefully. Can we afford to take the same risk? Okay. So we've looked at the problem of not understanding the problem. Then we looked at some of the things that we can do to address this, and I'm absolutely sure there are many more of both. And it is important to say that that none of this work that we're doing is ever any substitute for a proper UX research approach. But the point I'm trying to make is that there are so many examples that we need to work with where that's just simply not possible. And I want to close with a quick thought. It's my last slide. How do the time? I'm absolutely sure that UX research is done differently in all different contexts, different businesses. But I have found that probably half of our time is spent trying to understand the problem, trying to find out the why. But half of the time is also spent trying to communicate that. And the phenomena of a user could does not equal a user would means that a lot of UX research is actually about uncovering truths and insights and then communicating that. But if we're not communicating it really, really well, then all of that is kind of meaningless. And I mention this because perhaps our discipline can place a little bit too much emphasis on the method or the methodology, when actually this softer skill of being able to work with stakeholders and communicate with stakeholders and steer stakeholders away from imagined problems onto real problems is equally valuable for success. Thank you.